I used to sit alone in a room talking to a mic like a psycho. Now I'm sitting alone in a room talking to a camera like a psycho. Now imagine being a kid in the orphanage. You're already dealing with abandonment, instability, and the daily chaos of growing up without parents. Then some random adult walks in, telling you have problems with your speech, saying you don't talk right. Calling you simple jack and shit. That you're broken. And the worst part, they're lying. They made it up just to see what would happen. Now, that's not some plot of a psychological thriller on Netflix. That's real history. This was an actual experiment conducted on real children, and it left these children with permanent psychological damage. Now I'm about to crash out, because we don't play with kids on this channel. Welcome to the Monster Study, one of the most disturbing psychological experiments you probably never heard of. Now, follow the Silk Sash Savior as we unravel this story together. The year's 1939. Well, not right now, it's actually 2025, but in this story, the year's 1939. The Great Depression's coming to an end, and World War II is about to pop off over in Europe. But over here in a little town in Iowa, a group of researchers were cooking up a diabolical experiment so messed up it had to be buried for decades. Now, this study was led by a grad student named Mary Tudor, under the supervision of her boy WeeWeeJohnson. Now, he was one of the most respected speech pathologists of the time. But I have to say, respected or not, anyone watching this video, do not name your kids Wendell. That is a crazy name. Wait, and Johnson? Isn't that another name for a man's meat? His parents really named him WeeWee Penis. There's no way this is a real story. So anyway, WeeWee was known for his work on stuttering. See, he believed stuttering was not a biological issue, but instead a psychological one. He thought you developed it, so he thought he could cause it. He was thinking if you were to tell kids that they had a speech impediment or that they had a stutter, over time, they would actually develop one. Now, that theory sounds plausible, right? But instead of testing this in an ethical, moral, or normal way, like on adults or volunteers, nah, Buddy went to an orphanage and tested it on orphans. This dude's like the anti-Nacho Libre. Bro, if I was there, I'd be kicking in doors, looking for orphan Annie. Hey, Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? This study involved 22 children from the Iowa Soldiers and Sailors Orphanage. Now, half of these kids already had speech impediments. Half of them didn't. Mary's last name was Tudor, but all she did was gaslight these kids into thinking that they didn't know things. I don't need iDubbbz to come explain the levels of irony here. So, Tudor has these kids split up into 4 groups. The ones who suffered from speech impediments and the ones who didn't. Inside those groups, they were split up. Negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement for both. I'm here to tell you, WeeWee and Mary The Bad Tudor were really running through the halls of this orphanage, tormenting kids like Joker and Harley Quinn. Because the kids who didn't stutter, they were told that they did, that they had a problem, that they had a speech impediment. These were normal, healthy, regular speaking kids, and these researchers straight up gaslit them into believing that they had a speech problem. Bro, think about that for a second. They had perfectly normal speaking kids that they were telling they were stuttering. They probably had little Billy over there trying to practice his words, saying, pull. And they were over his shoulder yelling at him, "Stop stuttering, Billy, stop." I know this man was sitting in the corner peeing on himself like a nervous dog. But here's how they did it. For several months, the children were visited regularly by Mary Tudor, who acted like a friendly speech evaluator. But the messages that she gave to these kids were vastly different depending on which category they were in, the positive reinforcement or the negative reinforcement group. See, to the negative reinforcement group, she would say real messed up things like, "Your speech is abnormal," or "I'ma send you to go see WeeWee." And over time, the children, even the ones who were completely fluent, they began to withdraw, speak less. They avoided talking in class, or when they would talk, they would even hesitate. Now, the reason this all happened is because the experiment worked perfectly, in a bad way. See, this woman was the original gaslighter, bro. Patient zero. And she did it all to orphans. Ladies out there, I'm sorry, but you're never gonna beat the gaslighting allegations. Now, what they proved, intentional or not, is just how terrifyingly fragile a child's sense of self is. See, when you're that young, you don't look at adults strictly as authority figures. They define reality for you. So when one tells you that you're broken, you just believe it. And you carry that emotional damage into every relationship, conversation, and experience that you live. I mean, think about it. When we were kids, we believed in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny. Bro, I said the Easter Bunny. Think about it. We really believed there was a 6-foot tall rabbit hopping around our front yard, having chicken eggs come out his ass. The same chicken eggs we just painted the day before. Were we retarded? Yes, we were. So anyway, going back to the orphans. The results of the study were an absolute disaster. See, most of these children in the negative reinforcement group developed long-term issues. And I'm not talking about permanent speech issues. They did develop those. I'm talking about psychological problems. See, these kids, they developed anxiety, depression. Some even had complete social isolation, completely refusing to speak at all. And then, after their personalities changed permanently, no one even tried to help them or fix it afterwards. Mary Tudor actually realized mid-experiment that what she was doing was wrong, but the study, it just kept going forward. And then when it was over, her and WeeWee, they just dipped and left the kids with their newfound problems. No debrief, no therapy, no follow-up appointments. I mean, bro, you can have no healthcare, no money here in America and get a damn follow-up appointment. I don't know what they were doing to these kids. But I will say that right there, that's how you know someone does not care about you. This woman, Mary Tudor, really sat there thinking, damn, I really am messing with these kids. Oh well, the show must go on, so fuck them kids. But then to add insult to injury, they didn't even publish their findings. WeeWeeJohnson was either too ashamed or too aware of how unethical the study actually was to even ever release the data publicly. So these kids were already carrying the trauma from abandonment, poverty, or even abuse. You know, regular things that can happen to orphans. Many had no family to even fall back on, no support system, no one to advocate for them. And that's really what makes this whole thing hit harder. They were chosen because they had no way to fight back. They were basically silent sacrifices on the altar of academic prestige. It was basically no different than how some of these serial killers out here will just exclusively kill prostitutes because they know no one's out here looking for them. Now, let's pause for a second and really check out the irony here, because this was a speech therapy experiment designed by a speech pathologist who once stuttered himself. WeeWee knew exactly how painful that experience could be for a child, but instead of using that experience to protect children, his dumbass decided to exploit them and cause them pain. Now, do you guys remember in the Stanford prison experiment video when I said Philip Simbardo was basically just a bullied kid who grew up and took out his anger on all the popular kids by putting them as prisoners in his experiment? Would you look at that? Another reporter doing the exact same thing. Fellas, you're grown adults. Get over your old childhood past trauma. But anyway, back to the disrespect. Because of the disturbing nature in this study, Johnson and Tudor never formally published it. See, the whole thing was just buried in a University of Iowa archive for decades. And it wasn't even until the early 2000s that the study resurfaced. And when it did, people were horrified. The media even dubbed it the monster study, and suddenly the University of Iowa had a terrible PR nightmare on its hands. Some critics compared it to the Nazi human experiments. You know, the same Nazi human experiments you never want to be associated with? And listen, I said that this all popped off in 1939. Now that date's important because it wasn't until 2001, I'm pretty sure that's 62 years later. In 2001, the university finally formally apologized. Then 6 years after that, in 2007, the state of Iowa finally awarded financial compensation to the victims. Bro, is that 68 years later? Some of these motherfuckers were probably already dead. But anyway, why does any of this even matter today? Well, because this wasn't some rogue mad scientist in a cave trying to create a new heart like Iron Man, bro. This was a well-respected researcher in a respected university under the supervision of trusted academics, experimenting on children in plain sight for decades, and nobody even said a word. So this is really a big reminder that the scientific process doesn't just need intelligence, it also needs ethics and morals. Because if you get so wrapped up and obsessed in the why question, sometimes you'll forget to ask, should we do this? And then, next thing you know, history's repeating itself. Whether it be the Stanford prison experiment, MKUltra mind control, or this little silent horror story tucked away in a University of Iowa archive. Because honestly, here's the brutal truth. If the results had been more successful, we'd be talking about this completely differently. Mary Tudor and WeeWee probably would have been given awards. The study would have been called innovative, groundbreaking, things like that. Look back to World War II, the Nazis. The Nazi scientists had really good research. What happened after that? The US basically forgave them and hired them on our team. And it's because in science, it's not the method people care about, it's the outcome. So, to be honest, this could easily still happen today if we just repackaged it. Imagine this exact same experiment, but done under the guise of an AI-based learning tool or behavioral feedback apps for kids. Then you sprinkle in some corporate branding and a few legal waivers, and we might not even blink twice before it's too late. So see, maybe we haven't really evolved that much. Today, we may like to think we're better, more ethical, more regulated, more moral. But go scroll through social media, check out some of the parent influencers. You'll see the exact same psychological games repackaged as discipline or growth. Gaslighting children has not disappeared. We just found out how to monetize it. Now, the monster study isn't really that famous. It's not taught in psych classes across the world or anything, but it is still one of the clearest examples of how easy curiosity can turn into cruelty, and then how long the damage can affect the victims. Now, if this video blew your mind or pissed you off, let me know in the comment section below. And if you liked it, hit that like button and subscribe if you'd like. But like always, y'all already know what it is. Stay safe out there, and I'm gonna see y'all next time.